Ava Williams had always had the reins of her life firmly in her hands. At 26 years old, she took pride in her independence. The promising career she had built as a marketing assistant at a renowned agency, and the strict routine that helped her stay focused. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Houston, Texas wasn't easy, but Ava never let it bring her down. She knew what she wanted, and she knew how to get it. Or so she thought. Everything changed that night. It was a Friday, and the University of Houston campus was buzzing with the energy of an event that had been anticipated for months. A party bringing together the most popular fraternities and sororities on campus. Students were loose, celebrating the arrival of summer, and Ava for once decided to let go of what could be one of the few nights of freedom she'd have in a long time. It wasn't something she did often, but something inside her urged her to embrace the fun. She didn't exactly remember how it all started. She recalled laughter, loud music, the smell of beer and sweat mixed together, and a feeling of warmth, like she was finally at home with friends, letting go of the stresses of daily life. Beer turned into tequila, and what began as a joke became a series of uncontrolled moments. Ava didn't remember when the kiss happened, or when their bodies collided in the dark corner of the yard. All she knew was that she woke up the next morning, alone in an empty bed, with her head pounding, and the sensation of having been run over by a truck. And there was something else, something that made her hold her breath when she looked at herself in the mirror. Her body, more specifically her stomach, seemed a little different. Ava sat on the bed, her hands trembling, trying to process what was happening. It was impossible for this to be happening to her. It couldn't be. The pregnancy test was almost an automatic confirmation. The two red lines started to appear before her eyes, as if mocking her attempt to stay in control of the situation. She was pregnant and had no idea by whom. The first days were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, panic, anger, confusion. She tried to focus on what needed to be done next, but she couldn't. Talk to her mom? Impossible. She would never have the courage to reveal this. Talk to her friends? They were far away, and Ava didn't want to be seen as the weak one who needed help. It was something she never knew how to ask for. Choosing to raise the children on her own became the only viable option. Ava's life, once governed by professional and personal goals, was suddenly marked by this new and challenging reality. She pulled away from friends, lost job opportunities due to taking time off, and loneliness became her only companion. When the twins were born, it was a mix of despair and happiness. Ava had to learn to be a mother alone in a world that seemed not to care about her struggle. In the first few months, everything was a routine of diapers, sleepless nights, and a mountain of responsibilities. Ava tried to move forward, but the weight of not knowing who the father of her daughters was consumed her, even though she tried to hide it from herself. The faces of her daughters, with features she barely recognized as her own, haunted her. When they smiled, their little eyes sparkling with happiness, Ava felt a pang of sadness, as if she knew something was missing, but didn't know what. She was raising those girls on her own, but a part of her heart felt that, somehow, what they needed was something more. It was the beginning of a new life. A life that Ava had to learn to live, facing the challenges of day-to-day life and trying to find some meaning, some peace amidst the chaos. But unknowingly, That chaos would soon become even greater, and the search for answers would lead her down a path she could never have anticipated. Years passed, and Ava Williams learned to live with the absence of answers. Her daughters, Eliza and Sophia, grew up healthy, but Ava never stopped wondering who the father of her children could be. The emptiness of that question consumed her in silence. Every time the girls looked at her with their curious, innocent eyes, she would wonder if there was something they needed to know, something she couldn't tell them. Life hadn't been easy, but she had managed to find some balance. Working as a marketing assistant at a small local agency, Ava had managed to recover from the financial crisis that almost drove her to bankruptcy shortly after the girls were born. Over time, she was able to rent a small apartment in a quieter neighborhood, away from the chaos of the university life that had changed her forever. It wasn't until the girls turned 5 that the bombshell dropped. Ava took the girls for a routine checkup, something simple, just a visit to the pediatrician to make sure everything was going well. But what should have been a routine checkup turned out to be the turning point in her life. The doctor asked a series of questions, and at the end of the consultation, he asked Ava to stay a little longer. "There's something we need to talk about," the pediatrician said with a serious expression. Ava looked at him, confused. "What's going on?" "It's about the girls," he said, looking at the papers on his desk. "I'm concerned about the results of the genetic tests. There's something rare that came up, something we need to investigate further." Those words didn't make sense to Ava at first, but the pediatrician continued explaining that one of the girls, Eliza, had a rare genetic condition, something treatable, but that would require special attention. What Ava didn't know was that this discovery would completely change her life. The condition was so rare that, according to the doctors, it was impossible to treat without knowing Eliza's complete genetic history. To understand the best course of treatment, they needed to know the identity of the father, something Ava had no idea how to uncover. For a moment, Ava felt her world crumble. For years, she had refused to think about the possibility of finding the father of her daughters. But now, with Eliza's health on the line, reality forced her to face the impossible. She knew she needed answers. But how could she find someone she didn't even know? In the following weeks, Ava struggled with the dilemma. She revisited her memory of that night, searching for fragments that could lead to a clue. But the memories were foggy, vague, like a distant dream. Then she remembered Elijah Carter, her best friend from college. Elijah had been her rock during tough times, the one person who never let her down when she needed help. Their friendship was solid, almost like family. He had always known about her situation, but had never pressured her to talk about the father of the girls. Ava didn't want to burden Elijah with this additional weight, but there was no choice. She reached out to him, breaking down in tears when she finally found him at his place. "I don't know what to do," Ava said, hugging Elijah. "I need to find the father of the girls. I need to know who he is to save Eliza." Elijah looked at her with understanding. He knew how painful this was for her. "Ava, I'm going to help you. No matter what happens, we'll find the truth." From that moment on, Ava's world shifted. She and Elijah, along with Naomi, Iva's sister, started investigating what had really happened that fateful night. But what they didn't know was that by delving into this past, they would start uncovering secrets Ava never imagined existed. Secrets that could not only change Eliza's life but also destroy the image she had of herself and the world around her. The investigative work started slow and meticulous. Ava, Elijah, and Naomi met regularly to discuss what they had discovered. Ava knew the road ahead would be tough, but she didn't expect how much her own beliefs and what she knew about the past would be shaken. First, Elijah reached out to some people who had attended the university party where it all began. Many of them had drifted apart since then, but he was still able to track a few down. Most of the witnesses didn't remember exactly who was with whom that night. Some even changed the subject when it came up. But slowly a clue emerged. A friend of Ava's, Samantha, had mentioned a new guy in town, someone who also attended the party. He had been visibly interested in Ava, but he wasn't a familiar face to her. Ava vaguely remembered someone, a man who seemed strangely familiar, but her memory was blurry. The images mixed together, as if she were trying to see through a dusty window. But nothing made sense. She didn't know who he was, nor what had happened. What she did know was that he seemed to be the key to what was happening now. In time, they managed to find the man's name, Ryan Cooper. He had been a psychology student at the university, but had transferred to another city shortly after the event. Nothing too unusual, but enough to spark Ava's curiosity. Aisha found out a few details about Ryan, such as his address in another city, and some information about his academic background. Naomi, always the more impulsive one in the family, suggested they go there in person to try to find him. Ava hesitated. She didn't want to face this man without knowing what he thought, without being sure he could be the father of the girls. But at the same time, she knew there was no other choice. The doctor's words still echoed in her mind, and the need to save Eliza made her take action she never would have considered before. So they traveled to Ryan's town. The small city seemed quiet, with its silent streets and cozy cafes. Ava felt a growing anxiety in her chest, her heart pounding with every corner they turned. She didn't know what they would find, but she had the feeling this would change everything. Arriving at Ryan's house, they found a simple, well-kept residence. Elijah rang the doorbell. Ava took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. When the door opened, a middle-aged woman appeared. She smiled, but the smile quickly faded when she saw the serious expression on Ava's face. "Hi, sorry to interrupt," Elijah said with a friendly smile. "We're looking for Ryan Cooper. Does he live here?" The woman looked at them for a moment, thoughtful, before stepping back. "Ryan isn't home at the moment," she said, her voice calm but strange. "But I'm his mother. Can I help with something?" Ava, not knowing what to say, stayed quiet while Elijah briefly explained the situation. Ryan's mother looked at them with suspicion, but when she saw the seriousness of the situation, she relented. "Ryan didn't mention anything about this incident, but if it's serious, maybe I should tell you. He was really shaken after that party. I didn't know exactly what he was up to, but he seemed to have changed after that. If you want to know more about what happened, he's the only one who can explain." Those words left Ava even more confused. Shaken? What did that mean? She didn't want just vague words. She wanted answers. When Ryan came back, she would face him, even if it was the last thing she did. Meanwhile, Elijah tried to reach out to more locals, hoping to gather more information. The small town wasn't full of secrets, but life there seemed quieter, with less hustle and bustle. And as he talked to the townspeople, Ava began to realize there might be more to it than just a party, something deeper that she hadn't even considered. The days passed without any news. Ava grew anxious, but at the same time, she felt that every moment took her further away from the answer she so desperately sought. She felt the pieces were there, scattered, waiting to fit together. Then, finally, she received a phone call. It was Ryan. He was in town. He'd heard about their visit, and he wanted to talk. Ava, feeling a mix of relief and fear, arranged to meet him. They met at a cafe in town, and when Ryan showed up, Ava could hardly recognize the man in front of her. He looked older, more worn out, his eyes deep and distant. "I know you want answers," Ryan said, taking the lead. "But to be honest, I don't know if you're ready to hear them." Ava stared at him for a long moment before taking a deep breath. "I just want to know what happened that night. And I want to know if you are the father of my girls." He looked at her for a long time before taking a deep breath. "I'm not their father, Ava. But what happened at that party, it was more than you think." Ryan's words hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. Ava felt her heart race, and, for a moment, she couldn't process what he had just said. Not their father? But then who? Her mind raced back to that night, to the blur of faces, to the chaotic party, and the overwhelming confusion. It was all starting to make less sense, not more. "What do you mean?" Ava asked, her voice tight with frustration. "If you're not their father, then who is? I need to know. I need to know what happened that night." Ryan ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. He looked at the floor, as if trying to find the right words. "There's more to the story, Ava," he finally said, his voice low. "That night wasn't just a night of fun. There was something going on, something nobody told you. I never meant for it to happen the way it did, and I certainly didn't mean to hurt you, but I have to be honest with you. It wasn't just me at that party." Ava's pulse quickened. "What are you saying? Who else was there? Who else?" Ryan hesitated, his eyes flicking nervously around the cafe, as if making sure no one else could hear. He leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "There was someone else, someone influential, a friend of mine, but not a good one. He's the one who should have been there that night, but for some reason, it ended up being me. I never thought this would get out of hand like this. He's the one who you might want to talk to." Ava felt the weight of his words settle in. Another person, an influential person? Her stomach twisted, and the pieces of the puzzle began to feel like they were slipping out of her grasp. She needed to know more. She needed answers. "Who is he?" Ava asked, her voice trembling. "Who is the man you're talking about?" Ryan looked around again, his eyes darting nervously. "I don't think I should say his name. It's too dangerous. Trust me, you don't want to know. But he's connected to the university. To a lot of people. He's not someone you want to cross, Ava." Ava stared at him, disbelief written all over her face. "What are you saying? You expect me to just let it go, to walk away without knowing who this man is? Without knowing if he's the father of my children?" Ryan stood up suddenly, knocking over his coffee cup in his haste. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I never meant for this to happen. But I can't give you his name. Not like this. Not until you're ready." The words hit Ava like a slap to the face. She had come all this way, had confronted her own past, only to be left in the dark again. Anger flared up inside her, and she stood up, fists clenched. "No," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm done with the games. I need to know who he is. I need to know the truth, Ryan, for my girls. For me. I'm not leaving here until you tell me what I need to know." Ryan backed away, his expression desperate. "Ava, please." But before he could finish, Ava made her decision. She walked out of the cafe, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't leave it there. This wasn't just about finding the father of her children anymore. This was about something bigger, something that could affect everything her daughters, her future, and her sanity. As she stepped out into the cold air, Naomi and Elijah were waiting for her outside. Both looked worried when they saw her expression. "Ava, what happened? Did you get the answers you were looking for?" Elijah asked. Ava shook her head, her chest tight with frustration. "No, he's hiding something. There's someone else, someone who could be the father, but Ryan won't tell me who. He says I'm not ready to know. I don't know what to do anymore." Naomi stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "We can't just leave it like this. We have to keep pushing. There has to be more to this, and we will find out who this person is." Ava nodded, wiping the tears from her eyes. "I'm not giving up. I can't. I have to know for my girls." The journey was far from over. The secrets were still buried, and the answers were out of reach. But Ava, Elijah, and Naomi weren't going to stop until they uncovered the truth, no matter the cost. The search for answers consumed Ava. It wasn't just about the father of her children anymore. It was about uncovering the truth hidden deep beneath layers of lies and silence. She couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything else. Every minute felt like an eternity, each passing moment heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. Elijah and Naomi had been her unwavering support. They didn't push her to let go, didn't tell her to back off even though Ava could see the worry in their eyes. They had all come to the same conclusion. Ryan knew more than he was letting on, and they needed to get to the bottom of it. "Let's think about this logically," Elijah said one afternoon, sitting across from Ava at her small kitchen table. "Ryan's hiding something, but he's not going to tell you directly. So we need to go around him, find another way to get the information." Naomi nodded, her face serious. "We could go through the university. He might be connected to someone there. If we dig enough, we might find something that links him to this influential person he mentioned." Ava looked at both of them, grateful for their determination. She knew they were right. If Ryan wasn't going to speak, they'd have to find another way. The next day, they headed to the university, where Ava had attended classes before her life was turned upside down by the birth of her daughters. She knew the campus well, but it felt foreign now, like a place filled with ghosts of the person she used to be. "I'll handle the administration," Elijah said. "Naomi, you and Ava should start with the people Ryan might have been close to. Friends, professors, anyone who could know about this person he's afraid to name." Ava nodded, her chest tight with anxiety. She wasn't sure what they would find, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't let this go. Not for her own peace of mind, and certainly not for her daughters. They split up, and Ava headed to the student lounge, a place she remembered as a hub of activity where everyone seemed to know each other. She'd spent countless hours there, studying, chatting, trying to carve out a future for herself. As she entered the lounge, memories flooded back, good times, bad times, the uncertainty of being a young woman trying to balance school, work, and life, but none of that mattered now. Now she was on a mission. She approached a few familiar faces, trying to keep her composure. Some were surprised to see her, others seemed to avoid her gaze. But there was one person she knew she had to talk to. Amber, a former classmate who had been close to Ryan back then, was sitting in the corner reading a book. "Ava," Amber said with a start when she saw her setting the book aside. "I didn't expect to see you here. How have you been?" Ava forced a smile. "I've been okay. Listen, I need your help with something. It's about Ryan. You knew him well back in the day, right? Is there anyone else he might have been close to? Someone he didn't talk about much?" Amber frowned, her brow furrowing in thought. "Ryan? Well, yeah, we were friends. He's a good guy, but I don't know if he's the person you should be asking about this. There were always rumors. You know how college can be. Everyone's got something to hide." Ava leaned in, her voice urgent. "Please, Amber, this is important. I need to know who else was involved. I have to know." Amber hesitated, looking around as if weighing her options. All right, she said finally, lowering her voice. "There was someone. I don't know much about him, but I heard Ryan talking about him once. His name is Marcus Blackwell. He's connected to a lot of important people, even outside the university. Ryan, he said something about him being at that party, but he was always so vague about it. I think he might be the one you're looking for." Ava's heart skipped a beat. Marcus Blackwell. The name sent a chill down her spine, but it also gave her hope. It was the lead she had been waiting for. "Where can I find him?" she asked quickly. Amber bit her lip, clearly unsure. "I'm not sure, honestly. He doesn't exactly hang out in public places, but he's got a lot of influence. You know, if you really want to find him, you might want to check with some of the bigger organizations he's involved with. Maybe some of the alumni events or fundraisers. People like him like to keep their names out there." Ava nodded, a surge of determination flooding her. This was it. Marcus Blackwell could be the key to everything. The man who had been connected to Ryan, the one who had been lurking in the background of that fateful night. As Ava made her way back to meet Naomi and Elijah, her mind raced. She couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was finally within her grasp. But would it be enough to save her daughters? And what would happen when she finally came face to face with Marcus Blackwell? The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Ava wasn't going to stop until she uncovered the truth, no matter the cost. The hours that followed felt like an endless blur for Ava. Every step she took, every lead she chased, seemed to only deepen the mystery. But her determination never wavered. The name Marcus Blackwell had stuck with her, and she knew that finding him was no longer just about the past. It was about saving her daughter. She could feel the weight of the stakes pressing down on her as she and Elijah began researching Blackwell's connections. "I've been looking into Blackwell," Elijah said, his voice low as he sat beside Ava in her small living room, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating his face. "There's not much online about him, but I found some mentions. He's involved in a lot of charity events, big ones, the kind that attract a lot of high-profile donors. And he's tied to an organization called the Archer Group. You've heard of it, right? Ava nodded slowly. She'd heard whispers of it over the years. An influential group with ties to powerful people in business, politics, and the arts. They operated in the shadows, their name barely mentioned, but their reach was vast. I've heard of it, Ava said, her voice tense. What's their deal? Elijah, you need to be careful, Naomi interjected, sitting across from them, her expression serious. These are powerful people. People who don't get their hands dirty, but pull the strings from behind the scenes. You don't want to get involved with them more than you have to. But if Blackwell is connected to them, we need to tread carefully. Ava sighed, rubbing her temples. I know, Naomi, but I have no choice. If there's even the smallest chance that Marcus Blackwell can help me save my daughters, I have to take it. I can't sit here and do nothing. Elijah looked at her, a sense of urgency in his eyes. We need to get to him before he disappears again. Let's go to one of these events, see if we can catch him. They spent the next few days tracking down Blackwell's whereabouts, piecing together his schedule from public events, social media, and insider gossip. It was like trying to catch a shadow. It was always one step ahead, never in the same place for too long. But then they found it. A gala, a fundraiser for an exclusive arts foundation, where Blackwell was listed as a key speaker. It's tonight, Naomi said, her voice barely containing her excitement. If we go now, we might actually be able to speak to him. Ava hesitated for a moment, her heart racing. She wasn't used to attending events like these gala dinners full of rich, influential people. It wasn't her world, but she had no choice now. We're going, Ava said firmly, her voice steady with resolve. We'll find him. The gala was held in a grand ballroom downtown, a dazzling display of wealth and prestige. Ava's stomach twisted with nerves as they walked through the doors, the extravagant decor overwhelming her senses. There were people everywhere, laughing, sipping champagne, exchanging business cards. It felt like a different world, a world that had nothing to do with her. Naomi and Elijah stuck close to her as they made their way through the crowd. Ava scanned the room, looking for any sign of Marcus Blackwell. Her nerves were on edge, her thoughts focused entirely on finding him, and finally getting the answers she needed. Minutes later, she spotted him across the room. Marcus Blackwell was standing by a large, ornate column, talking to a group of well-dressed men and women. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed, exuding an air of power and authority. He had an easy smile, his laughter almost contagious, as he charmed the people around him. There he is, Ava said, her voice barely a whisper. Elijah placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We can do this. Ava took a deep breath. Steeling herself, she knew what she had to do. As she approached Blackwell, the noise of the party seemed to fade away, her focus narrowing entirely on him. She was about to confront the man who could hold the key to her daughter's future. Mr. Blackwell, she said, her voice calm but firm as she approached him. He turned, his gaze briefly flicking over her, then softening when he saw the look in her eyes. Can I help you? He asked, his tone polite but distant. I'm Ava Williams, she began, her heart hammering in her chest. I need to speak with you about something very important. It's about the father of my children. Blackwell's demeanor shifted ever so slightly, a flicker of recognition in his eyes before he masked it with a smile. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. Ava cut him off, her voice more forceful now. I know you know who I am. I know you know who Ryan is. And I know you know the truth about what happened that night." The smile faded from Blackwell's face. He stepped back slightly, his expression hardening. "I don't know what you think you're getting at, but I suggest you leave it alone." Ava wasn't about to back down. "You owe me answers. You owe me the truth. And if you don't give it to me, I'll make sure everyone knows what you've been hiding." Blackwell's eyes narrowed, the facade of politeness slipping. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he muttered, but Ava could hear the fear in his voice. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," she said, her voice cold. "And I'm not leaving until I get what I came for." For a moment, Blackwell said nothing. Then, with a sigh, he looked over his shoulder as if gauging the room, and then turned back to Ava. "All right," he said, his voice low. "Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., at the old warehouse on 5th Avenue. I'll tell you everything, but you better come alone." Ava nodded, her heart pounding. She had what she wanted. She would finally get the answers she had been searching for. But as she turned to leave, a nagging feeling crept up her spine. She couldn't shake the suspicion that this meeting wouldn't be as simple as Blackwell made it seem. What was he really hiding? And what would happen when she finally uncovered the truth? The next morning, Ava could hardly sleep. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind, like a film she couldn't turn off. Marcus Blackwell's invitation to meet him at the old warehouse on 5th Avenue felt like both a breakthrough and a trap. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding more than just the identity of her children's father. Something about the way he'd reacted his fear, his sudden shift in demeanor, told her that he was far more involved in this story than she had imagined. She arrived early, just as the sun began to rise over the city, casting long shadows across the warm, industrial buildings of the district. The warehouse on 5th Avenue was a crumbling relic of the city's past, a massive, windowless structure that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. Ava hesitated for a moment before walking up to the rusted metal doors. Her heart thudded in her chest, but there was no turning back now. She had to face whatever waited inside. The door creaked open as she pushed it, revealing the cavernous space inside. It smelled of dust and old wood, and the floors were covered in patches of grime and oil stains. In the distance, she could see Blackwell standing near the center, his back to her, speaking to someone she couldn't yet make out. Ava's instincts screamed at her to turn and leave, but her legs carried her forward. She needed answers. She had to find out what was going on. As she approached, Blackwell turned to face her, a cool, almost calculating expression on his face. Beside him was a man she didn't recognize, his features sharp and his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. His presence only intensified Ava's unease. "Miss Williams," Blackwell said smoothly, his voice low and controlled. "I'm glad you came. This is my associate, Caleb. He's here to help with the situation we're about to discuss." Ava nodded, but couldn't hide the suspicion that gnawed at her. She was sure that this was not just a simple conversation about her daughter's father. "I don't need an associate," Ava replied, her voice firm. "I need the truth. What's really going on here, Blackwell?" He glanced at Caleb, then back at Ava, as if deciding whether to trust her. Finally he spoke, his voice tinged with something that bordered on regret. "I never wanted any of this to happen. I never planned for things to go this far." Ava's patience was running thin. "What are you talking about?" Just tell me what happened." Blackwell took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping slightly, as if the weight of the situation was finally catching up to him. "The truth is, I am the father of your daughters." Ava froze. Her breath caught in her throat as the words sank in. She had suspected it, but hearing it from Blackwell's lips made it feel like a punch to the gut. She had just discovered that the man standing before her, this wealthy, powerful figure, was the father of her children. But there was more. She could see it in his eyes. "Why didn't you come forward?" Ava asked, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Why did you leave me to raise them alone?" Blackwell lowered his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. "I didn't know. I didn't know I was the father until a few months ago. And by then, it was too late to come to you." Ava's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of this revelation. "But why didn't you try to contact me earlier? Why didn't you step in when you knew they were mine?" He sighed, his expression hardening. "Because I didn't want to complicate things. I was in a difficult situation, and I didn't want to bring my problems into their lives." Ava couldn't believe what she was hearing. This wasn't the answer she had expected. But then a new question arose. "You said you didn't know until a few months ago," Ava said, her voice now steady but cold. "What happened a few months ago? Why the sudden change?" Blackwell hesitated, then spoke in a lower tone, as if weighing every word. "I found out about the genetic condition, the one your daughters have. It's rare, and it's inherited. It was only when I had my DNA tested for a separate issue that I realized I had passed it on to them." Ava's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this. The condition, the one that had been plaguing her daughters, was linked to Blackwell. "So you're telling me," she said slowly, "that you've known about this condition for months and you've just now decided to come forward." Blackwell's gaze flickered with guilt, but he didn't look away. "I didn't know how to handle it. I'm not proud of the way I've handled things, but I'm here now. I want to help. I'm trying to fix what I can." "Help?" Ava repeated, incredulous. "Help by showing up after all this time? After I've raised my daughters on my own, struggled to give them everything they needed, and now you want to help?" Elijah, who had been standing silently off to the side, finally spoke. "Ava, we can't waste time on blame. If Blackwell knows something that can help, we need to focus on that. Right now, your daughters need you to stay strong." Ava shot Elijah a grateful glance, but didn't take her eyes off Blackwell. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice steady, yet full of tension. Blackwell stepped closer, his expression darkening. "I need you to trust me. I'm trying to help you. I'm willing to cover the medical expenses for your daughters. I'll get the best doctors, the best treatments. But I need you to allow me into their lives. I need to be involved." Ava recoiled slightly, her mind spinning. This was more than just a financial offer. It was an attempt to control her family, to control the situation. It was hard to believe that after all these years of silence, Blackwell was offering anything that wasn't tainted with his own self-interest. "I'll think about it," Ava said, her voice firm. "But don't think you can just waltz back into my life and pretend you can fix everything. It's not that simple." Blackwell's gaze softened just for a moment before he nodded. "I understand. But know this, I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." Ava turned on her heel, her heart racing as she left the warehouse. the weight of Blackwell's words heavy in her chest. This was only the beginning. What had she just stepped into? And was she ready for the consequences of the truth? Ava couldn't stop thinking about Blackwell's words as she drove home. Each one echoed in her mind like a distant drumbeat, persistent and impossible to ignore. He was the father of her children. He had been the one she had been searching for all these years, the man whose absence had haunted her, whose identity had remained a painful mystery, and now here he was, offering to help to fix what had been broken. But Ava didn't know if she could trust him. Her gut told her that there was more to his story than he was letting on, but her heart, the part of her that had carried the burden of motherhood for so long, was torn. As she parked in front of her modest home, she noticed Naomi sitting on the front steps, her face etched with worry. Her sister had been an unshakable source of support throughout this entire ordeal, and Ava knew that Naomi could sense something was off. "Hey," Naomi greeted softly, rising to her feet as Ava stepped out of the car. "How'd it go? What did he say?" Ava didn't answer immediately. She took a deep breath, looking at Naomi as she tried to collect her thoughts. "He said he's the father of the girls, Marcus Blackwell." Naomi's eyes widened. She had known about the mystery surrounding the girl's father, but hearing that name was a shock. Blackwell, as in the billionaire businessman, the one everyone talks about. "Yeah," Ava replied, her voice heavy. "That Blackwell, the one with the money and the power. The one who's been living his life while I've been doing everything I can to raise these girls." Naomi took a moment to process this. And now he wants to step in and be part of their lives? "Not just that," Ava said, her voice growing sharp. "He wants to help with the medical expenses. He wants to be involved. But I don't know if I can trust him. He's been absent all these years. And now, just when things get hard, he shows up and says he wants to fix everything. It feels like a game to him." Naomi stepped closer, placing a hand on Ava's arm. "Ava, I know you've been doing this on your own for so long, but maybe you should think about it. You don't have to do everything alone. If he really wants to help, maybe he can. Maybe this is your chance to get the answers you've been looking for. You've been carrying this weight for so long, and maybe, just maybe, it's time to let someone else help." Ava shook her head. "I'm not sure, Naomi. I don't know if I'm ready to let him back in. And what about the girls? What if they get hurt again? I don't want them to feel abandoned, especially after everything they've been through." Naomi gave her a reassuring smile. "You've always been the one to protect them. You've been their rock. But even rocks need support sometimes. You don't have to make a decision right now. Just think about it." Ava stood in silence for a long moment, her mind racing with thoughts of the future. What would it mean to let Blackwell into their lives? Could she trust him, or was this all just a convenient attempt to clean up a mess he had created? But Naomi was right. She couldn't keep carrying this burden alone. The sound of laughter from inside the house pulled Ava from her thoughts. She could hear the girls Jade and Mia playing in the living room. Their voices were light and carefree, unaware of the storm that had just been unleashed. Ava's heart ached at the thought of their innocence, their need for stability, and their love for both her and the man who had suddenly reappeared in their lives. She had to make a decision, and fast. Time was running out for her daughters. The genetic condition, the one that had been causing them problems for years, was a ticking clock. The clock was louder now, more urgent. Ava had to act. But what was the right choice? She walked into the house, greeted by the bright smiles of her daughters. They ran up to her, excited to tell her about the game they had made up, the imaginary world they had created in their minds. For a moment, Ava was lost in their joy, in the pure love that she had fought so hard to protect. But reality came rushing back as she remembered the conversation with Blackwell. The truth was a bitter pill to swallow, and Ava wasn't sure she was ready to face it. She knelt down to meet the girls' eyes, giving them each a kiss on the forehead. "Mommy needs to think about something, okay?" she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "But no matter what, I'm here. I'm always here for you." Jade and Mia nodded, their innocent faces filled with trust. They didn't understand what was happening, but they knew that their mother would never leave them. They were her everything, and she would do whatever it took to protect them. Later that evening, as Ava sat in the quiet of her living room, she turned over her options. She had to make a choice, but there was no easy answer. Could she bring Marcus Blackwell into their lives? Could she trust him? Or would she be making a mistake she couldn't undo? A knock on the door startled her, and when she opened it, Elijah stood there, his face serious. "Hey, Ava," he said softly. "Can we talk?" Ava stepped aside, allowing him into the house. "Of course," she replied, her voice tinged with exhaustion. Elijah sat down next to her, his expression thoughtful. "I know this is a lot for you to handle right now," he began, "but you don't have to make this decision alone. I'm here for you, just like I've always been." Ava felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Elijah had always been there for her, offering his support, his love, without hesitation. But this was different. This was a decision that would change everything. "I don't know what to do, Elijah," she admitted, her voice trembling. "This could be the chance I've been waiting for, to get the girls the help they need. But it's also a chance for him to waltz back into our lives and take over. I don't know if I'm ready for that." Elijah reached out, placing his hand over hers. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just take it one step at a time. Do what feels right for you and for Jade and Mia. You're their mother, Ava. You'll always know what's best." Ava looked at Elijah, his unwavering support giving her a sense of calm she hadn't felt in days. He was right. She didn't have to have all the answers today. But one thing was clear. Whatever she chose, she couldn't let fear control her. She had to do what was best for her daughters, even if that meant making a choice she wasn't ready for. The day Ava had dreaded finally arrived. She had spent the past few days going back and forth, wrestling with herself, her emotions, and the impossible decision that had been placed before her. Could she trust Marcus Blackwell? Could she trust herself? Every choice seemed to lead her down a path of uncertainty, and the clock was ticking louder with every passing minute. Jade and Mia, blissfully unaware of the weight on their mother's shoulders, had continued their playful, innocent existence. But Ava's mind had been consumed by the need for answers. The phone call from Marcus had come just as she was preparing dinner. His voice, calm and measured, carried an unsettling undertone that Ava couldn't ignore. "I've arranged a meeting, Ava. A private one," he said. "I believe it's time we have a conversation about what comes next. We need to discuss the girls, their future, and how I can help." The words hung in the air, as heavy as the question that had been tormenting her for so long. Marcus Blackwell. The man who had once been a stranger, the man whose face was now etched into her life, was finally ready to meet. But Ava wasn't sure if she was prepared for the answers he might provide or the questions he might ask. As she sat at her kitchen table, the silence around her felt suffocating. She had to make a decision, but the fear of making the wrong one still lingered. She glanced at the clock on the wall. She had a few hours before the meeting. Enough time to gather her thoughts, enough time to decide if she was ready to face the man who might hold the key to her daughter's future. She called Naomi, who had been a constant presence in her life during the past few years. Naomi picked up immediately, her voice warm, but with a hint of concern. "Ava, what's going on? You sound distant." "I'm meeting Marcus Blackwell tonight," Ava said, her voice trembling with nerves. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm ready for this." Naomi's response was calm, but Ava could sense the worry beneath her words. "You don't have to do this alone. You've been doing it on your own for so long, but if you need help, if you need someone to be there, I'll be there. No questions asked." Ava smiled softly, grateful for her sister's unwavering support. "I know, Naomi. I don't know what I'd do without you. But I can't help feeling like I'm walking into something I'm not prepared for. I've lived my life protecting the girls, keeping them safe from harm. What if this is just another mistake? What if Marcus isn't who he says he is?" Naomi sighed, a gentle but firm sound. "You can't predict everything, Ava. You've done everything you can to give Jade and Mia the best life possible. But sometimes life throws you curveballs. You can't control everything. You have to trust yourself, and you have to trust that you're doing the best thing for them." Ava held the phone to her ear, nodding to herself as Naomi's words settled in her mind. She had always been the protector, but perhaps it was time to allow someone else to share that responsibility. She had to trust that, in the end, she would make the right decision. As the evening approached, Ava dressed carefully, choosing something that was both professional and modest. She wanted to appear confident, even if she didn't feel it. She ran her fingers through her hair, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at her wasn't just the mother of two young girls. She was someone who had fought tooth and nail for everything she had. Someone who had been knocked down time and time again, but had never given up. The drive to the meeting place was a blur of nerves and anticipation. Marcus had arranged to meet at a quiet cafe downtown, a place that seemed to scream secrecy. Ava's heart raced as she parked her car and made her way inside. The dimly lit cafe had a serene, almost somber atmosphere. Ava scanned the room, her eyes locking onto a man sitting at the back, his sharp features and business attire unmistakable. Marcus Blackwell. She approached him slowly, her breath caught in her throat. When he looked up and met her gaze, something shifted in the air. Ava felt a strange mixture of familiarity and distance. This was the man who was supposed to be the father of her children, the man who had somehow disappeared from their lives for 5 long years. And yet, there was no warmth in his eyes, only the cold calculation of a businessman who had made his decision long ago. "Ava," Marcus said, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. "Thank you for meeting with me." She nodded, taking a seat across from him. Her palms were sweaty, her nerves on edge. But she wasn't here to play games. She was here for answers. "Let's get to the point," Ava said, her voice steady. You're telling me that you're the father of my daughters, that you're the one responsible for them being here. But why now, Marcus? Why show up after all this time? After everything I've done for them? Marcus met her gaze with a steely expression. I've always known about them, Ava. I've always known that I had children out there. But I wasn't ready. I didn't want to be a part of their lives, but now the situation is different. You need help, and I'm offering it. Ava's mind raced. Help with what? He hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. The girls have a rare genetic condition, don't they? I'm offering to help with the medical costs. I'm offering to provide them with the treatment they need. Ava's heart skipped a beat. So he did know. He knew about their condition. But that wasn't what troubled her. What troubled her was the calmness in his voice, the coldness in his demeanor. There was no emotion behind his words, no sign that he was genuinely concerned for his daughters. I don't know if I can trust you, Marcus, Ava said quietly, her voice filled with the weight of her doubt. You're offering help, but I don't know if I want it. I don't know if I want you to be a part of their lives. Marcus sat back, his expression unchanging. I'm not asking for your trust, Ava. I'm offering you a solution. Whether you take it is up to you, but don't let your pride get in the way of what's best for your daughters. The words hit her like a slap. Ava's pride had always been her armor, her shield against the world. But now, for the first time in years, she realized that it might not be enough to protect her daughters. She looked at Marcus, her mind spinning. The truth was staring her in the face, but it wasn't the truth she had hoped for. It was a truth that was cold, calculated, and painful. And now Ava had to decide if she would take the help or walk away. Ava walked out of the cafe with a heavy heart. The evening air felt colder than usual, biting into her skin as she pulled her coat tighter around her. She had asked for answers, but all she had received was more uncertainty. Marcus Blackwell's offer of help, his calm demeanor, and his almost detached approach to the situation had left her feeling more lost than ever. How could she trust a man who had been absent for 5 years, only to show up when his help was suddenly needed? Was he truly acting out of a sense of responsibility, or was there something else beneath the surface? Her mind spun with questions, each one leading to another. What was the truth? What was she supposed to do with this newfound information? And most importantly, could she protect Jade and Mia from the complexities of their father's existence? As she sat in her car, parked just outside the cafe, Ava stared at the dashboard, her hands gripping the wheel tightly. She wanted to go home to escape the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. There was a piece of the puzzle she still hadn't found, and she wasn't sure where to look next. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was Naomi, checking in as she always did. Ava, what happened? How did it go? Naomi's voice was full of concern, as if she had sensed the storm brewing in her sister's heart. Ava took a deep breath before answering. It was uncomfortable. He offered to help, but there was something off about it. He knows about the girl's condition, Naomi. He knows what's happening with them, and now he wants to be involved. Naomi was silent for a moment, processing the information. I don't like the sound of that. Are you sure you want to let him into their lives, Ava? What if he's just using you, using them? I don't know, Ava admitted. I don't know if I can trust him, but I don't have many options. The medical bills are piling up, and I can't keep going like this. Maybe he's the answer we've been looking for. But at what cost, Ava? Naomi's voice cracked with emotion. You fought so hard to protect them. Do you really want to bring someone like him into their lives? Ava glanced at the rearview mirror, watching the cars pass by as the city hummed around her. The weight of her decisions pressed down on her chest, suffocating her. I don't know what to do anymore, but I'm not sure I have a choice. I can't do this alone, Naomi. I need help, even if it means putting my trust in him. Naomi sighed, her voice softening. I just want you to be careful, Ava. You've been through so much. Don't let this man turn your life upside down, too. Ava's heart ached. She knew Naomi was right to be concerned, but she couldn't keep going down the path of self-reliance. She had been holding everything together for so long, but now the cracks were starting to show. The fear of losing her daughters to something beyond her control, the mounting medical expenses, and the endless, sleepless nights were wearing her down. The idea of letting Marcus help, even if it meant compromising her own values, was starting to seem like the only way forward. I'll be careful, Ava promised, though she wasn't sure if she believed it herself. I'll figure it out. I have to. With that, she ended the call and stared at her phone, the screen now blank and silent. She felt more alone than ever, trapped between the life she had built and the uncertainty that was now encroaching on it. The next morning, Ava awoke to the sound of Jade and Mia laughing in the other room. She had been so consumed by her meeting with Marcus that she had barely slept, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. But now, as she heard the sound of her daughters' voices, she was reminded of what really mattered. They were her world, her reason for fighting. She went into the living room where Jade and Mia were sitting on the floor, surrounded by toys. Their faces lit up as soon as they saw her, and Ava's heart swelled with love. "Good morning, Mama," Mia exclaimed, holding up a stuffed animal. "Look, Mr. Bear is hungry. He needs some food." Ava smiled and sat down beside them. "Well, let's feed Mr. Bear, then." As she played along with their game, she couldn't help but think about the decision that lay ahead. Marcus was offering help, but at what cost? She had always been the one to protect her girls, to shield them from harm. But now she was faced with a choice that could change everything. Could she trust Marcus? Could she allow him into their lives, even if it meant risking everything she had worked so hard to protect? The idea of bringing him back into their world, of allowing him to be a part of their lives, filled her with unease. But the reality was that she might not have any other choice. Her girls needed a future, and if Marcus was the one who could provide it, then she would have to make peace with her decision. Later that day, after the girls had gone to bed, Ava sat down at her kitchen table, a cup of tea in her hands, and stared at the stack of bills in front of her. The weight of them seemed insurmountable. She couldn't keep running from this problem forever. She had to face the truth. She couldn't do this alone. It was time to make a decision. As she sat there, contemplating the road ahead, she knew that whatever choice she made, it would shape the future of her family. There was no turning back. The next step she took would determine the course of her life and the lives of Jade and Mia. The decision was made. Ava could no longer delay the inevitable. She had been carrying the weight of the world for too long, trying to protect her daughters, trying to make ends meet, trying to keep everything together while the pieces threatened to fall apart. But now there was no avoiding it. Marcus Blackwell, for better or worse, was going to be a part of their lives. Ava sat in the living room, the dim light from the street lamp outside casting long shadows on the walls. She had called Marcus earlier that morning, agreeing to meet him again. He had said he would come to her apartment, that he wanted to speak with her face to face. For the first time in days, Ava felt a sense of calm, a sense of resolve. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. As the hour approached, she found herself pacing back and forth, the uncertainty clawing at her. What if she was wrong? What if Marcus's presence in their lives was a mistake? What if he wasn't the person he seemed to be? These were questions she couldn't answer yet, but she had to try. For Jade and Mia, the doorbell rang, pulling her from her thoughts. Ava's heart skipped a beat, and she quickly straightened up. She walked to the door, took a deep breath, and opened it. Marcus stood there, dressed in a dark coat and carrying a briefcase. His expression was serious but calm, his eyes betraying nothing. He was a man of few words, and Ava wasn't sure if that was a comfort or a warning. "Come in," she said, stepping aside to let him in. He nodded politely and entered the apartment, setting his briefcase down on the coffee table. Ava led him to the couch, where they both sat in silence for a moment. She could feel the weight of the moment, the heaviness of the decision she had made, pressing down on her. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice steady but unsure, "about everything. About what you said, about the girls, about us." Marcus didn't interrupt. He simply listened, his gaze never leaving her face. "I don't know what to think, Marcus," Ava continued, "but I do know that I can't keep doing this alone. The girls need more than what I can give them right now, and if you're willing to help, then I have to try. For them." Marcus didn't immediately respond. He seemed to be processing her words, weighing them carefully. "I understand," he said finally. "I know this isn't easy for you, and I know it's a big step. But I'm here, Ava. I'm not going anywhere. I want to help." Ava felt a twinge of doubt, but she pushed it aside. She had made her decision. She would trust him for now. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "I want to be a part of their lives," he said simply. "I want to be there for them, for you, and I want to help however I can." There it was, the words she had been waiting for. But even as she heard them, a small part of her wasn't sure if she should believe him. What did he really want? Was this truly about the girls, or was there something else beneath the surface? "I don't trust easily," Ava said, her voice barely above a whisper, "and I won't let anyone hurt them. But if you're really serious about this, then I'll give you a chance." Marcus nodded, his expression unreadable. "That's all I ask." They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of their conversation settling in. Ava could feel the tension in the room, the undercurrent of doubt that still lingered in the back of her mind. But she had made her choice. She would trust Marcus, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. "I'll let you know when the girls are ready to meet you," Ava said softly, standing up. "But I think it's time to start taking the next step." Marcus stood as well, his gaze never leaving hers. "Thank you, Ava. I won't let you down." As he left the apartment, Ava stood by the door, watching him disappear down the hallway. A sense of uncertainty still lingered in the air, but there was also a sense of hope. Maybe this was the right decision. Maybe Marcus would be the help they needed. Maybe he would be the one to give Jade and Mia the future they deserved. But Ava couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over. There were still too many unanswered questions, too many layers of this tangled web to untangle. And as much as she wanted to believe in Marcus, she knew she couldn't let her guard down completely. Not yet. Ava stood in the doorway, watching as Marcus's footsteps echoed down the hallway, his presence already fading into the distance. She closed the door softly behind her, locking it, as if to shut out the uncertainty that clung to her thoughts. Her fingers traced the edges of the wooden frame, trying to ground herself to find something solid amidst the swirling doubts. The silence of the apartment was deafening. For the first time in years, it felt like the walls were closing in, suffocating her with the weight of the decision she had just made. She had chosen to let Marcus into their lives, into the fragile world she had built with Jade and Mia. But even now, standing alone, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. The girls were still in their room, sleeping soundly. Ava had been careful not to wake them. They didn't need to know about Marcus just yet, not until she was sure. She had promised herself that she would never expose them to any more pain, to any more uncertainty. But even as she thought about them, she couldn't help but wonder, would she be able to keep them safe? Would Marcus be the man he claimed to be? Or was she walking down a path that would bring even more destruction? Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, the screen lighting up with an unfamiliar number. Ava hesitated for a moment before picking it up. She didn't recognize the area code, but something told her that this wasn't just another telemarketer. "Hello?" She answered, her voice shaky but steady. "Ava?" The voice on the other end was deep, calm, but there was something unsettling about it. "It's Marcus." Her heart skipped a beat, but she quickly regained her composure. "Marcus, what's going on?" "I need to talk to you. It's about the girls. There's something you need to know." Ava's stomach tightened. "What do you mean? What's going on?" "I can't explain it all over the phone," Marcus replied, his voice tinged with urgency. "But you need to meet me now. It's important. Please." Ava felt a rush of adrenaline flood her system. The calm she had felt moments ago was replaced with a sudden, unshakable fear. "Where are you?" "I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm not sure I can trust you yet." "I understand," Marcus said quickly. "But if you don't come, I can't promise what will happen next. Just please, I need you to come." Ava hesitated. The fear in his voice was real. She had heard it before, in the tone of people who had secrets, who were about to unravel something that could change everything. Was this the moment? Was Marcus finally going to reveal something that would answer all her questions or destroy everything she had fought so hard to build? "Where?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll text you the address." "Please don't take too long," Marcus said before hanging up abruptly. Ava stared at the phone for a moment, her mind racing. What could he possibly have to tell her? Was he warning her about something about himself? Or was this another attempt to draw her in deeper? It didn't matter. She had to go. She had to face whatever it was head on. She grabbed her jacket, threw her keys into her purse, and quietly walked toward the girls' room. They were still asleep, their little faces peaceful and unaware of the chaos that was unfolding around them. Ava leaned over their beds, brushing a stray lock of hair from Mia's face before kissing both girls gently on their foreheads. She whispered, "Mama loves you, always." The words felt like a promise she could never break. With one last glance at her daughters, Ava stepped out into the night, the weight of her choices pressing heavily against her chest. The streets were quiet as she drove through the city, her mind consumed by the fear of what awaited her. She kept glancing at the text Marcus had sent, a simple address that led her to a part of town she hadn't visited in years. It was a place she associated with pain, with loss, with the darkest chapters of her past. A place she had fought so hard to leave behind. The car came to a stop in front of a run-down building, a nondescript brick structure that seemed to fade into the shadows of the alley. Ava's breath caught in her throat. She recognized the place immediately. It was an old warehouse, the kind of building that once housed the dreams of young men and women with nowhere else to go. But now it was little more than a shell, a reminder of what had been and what could never be again. Marcus was waiting outside, his figure silhouetted against the faint glow of a nearby street lamp. He didn't move as Ava approached, his expression unreadable. She could feel her pulse quicken, her instincts screaming at her to turn back, to walk away and never look back, but she had come this far, and now she had to see it through. "Is this really necessary?" Ava asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound composed. Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he nodded slowly, his gaze locked on hers. "You'll understand when you see it." Ava followed him into the building, the air heavy with the scent of dust and neglect. She felt a chill creep up her spine as they walked deeper into the darkness, the only sound their footsteps echoing in the empty space. Ava's heart pounded in her chest. She was about to uncover something that could either fix everything or shatter it completely. Marcus stopped in front of a door at the end of the hallway, turning to face her. "This is it," he said quietly. "You wanted answers. Now you're going to get them." He opened the door, and Ava stepped inside. What she saw next was a sight that stopped her in her tracks. Jade and Mia were sitting on the floor, their little faces illuminated by the soft glow of a lamp. But what struck Ava even more was the man sitting beside them. Another man, a stranger, but somehow familiar. He looked at Ava with a mixture of guilt and recognition, and in that moment everything came crashing down. This man wasn't a stranger at all. This was someone from her past, the last person she ever thought would resurface, the father of her children. The truth had finally been revealed. Ava stood frozen in place, her mind racing as the pieces of her life fell into place, one by one. The shock, the disbelief, the anger, it all hit her like a tidal wave. The father of her daughters had been right under her nose all along. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ava whispered, her voice breaking. "Why now?" The man opened his mouth to speak, but Ava could already hear the answer in his eyes. It was too late. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back now. The past had come to claim its due, and Ava, standing at the crossroads of her past and her future, had to decide how she would move forward.